Right now, a silent monopoly is being built underneath the surface of the global financial system, and almost nobody is looking at the right data to see it happening. While most people are arguing back and forth about daily price movements on a chart, a $290 trillion bottleneck in the way money moves around the world is forcing the largest banks on earth to adopt a single neutral bridge asset for every cent they move across international borders. You clicked on this video because you have heard the idea that XRP is the Google of finance. And over the next 20 or so minutes, we are going to show you exactly why that comparison is not just social media hype. It is a structural certainty backed by real data and real-world developments. We are going to strip away all the retail noise and reveal the actual institutional plumbing happening beneath the surface. The massive graveyard of trapped capital sitting in nostro accounts around the world, and the exact reason why 99% of investors are currently standing on the completely wrong side of one of the biggest wealth transfers in human history. By the end of this investigation, you are going to understand the code. You are going to see the invisible financial rails that are about to transform a 1.35 digital commodity into the most critically important financial utility in history. Most people are staring at a price chart right now, completely unaware that they are actually witnessing the birth of a global financial monopoly happening right in front of them. Back in 2003, Google was just a search engine lost in a sea of noise and competition. Today, Google is essentially synonymous with the internet itself. And XRP is currently tracing that exact same invisible path that Google walked 2 decades ago. Let's rewind back to the early 2000s for a moment. The dot-com bubble had completely burst. Companies like Pets.com had failed spectacularly and disappeared. People were saying the entire internet was a scam and that it had all been one giant lie. Amidst all of that wreckage and disappointment, however, a small company called Google was quietly and patiently doing the unglamorous but enormously important work of indexing the entire world's information. Most investors completely missed what Google was building because they were focused on the ruins of the past rather than on the infrastructure of the future. Now fast forward to April 2026. The crypto hype has cooled down significantly. The get-rich-quick coins have mostly vanished into irrelevance. And yet Ripple is right now quietly building the payment rails for the world's money system. This is not just about transaction speed. It shows something critically important. While retail investors have largely checked out and lost interest, the actual real-world network usage of the XRP ledger is growing and exploding. We are now seeing the exact same silent adoption phase that turned a simple internet search box into a trillion-dollar powerhouse that changed how the entire world accesses information. We have entered what you could call the building phase. This is the period where the actual code gets written, the regulatory licenses get granted, and the major partnerships get signed and locked in. But the price remains frustratingly flat and stubborn. Critics will call XRP a stablecoin or a dead project with no future. They said exactly the same things about Amazon back in 2001 when its stock was sitting near all-time lows for years and years on end. Speculation is the bright flash in the pan that attracts enormous crowds very quickly. But actual network utility is the slow-burning fire that eventually consumes and completely transforms the entire legacy forest of global finance into something new and better. The market right now is essentially blind to the signal that is right in front of it. We have had regulatory clarity for weeks now, with the SEC and CFTC finally and officially agreeing that XRP is a digital commodity. But the broader public market is still sitting and waiting for a clear sign. They are waiting for an IPO moment that already happened quietly and invisibly on the ledger itself. This gap between what the technology is actually doing right now and what the public believes it is worth represents a massive transfer of wealth. Once that gap closes, the opportunity to position yourself on the right side of it will simply vanish. The 2003 Google lesson teaches us one thing above all else. The real winners are not the ones who screamed the loudest during the dot-com bubble. They are the ones who survived the crash and became the default setting for the entire planet. And XRP is not just another digital asset. It is positioning itself to become the search engine of the world's liquidity. The $290 trillion bottleneck global finance right now is trying to run a modern Ferrari on wooden wheels. And the cost of all that friction is a staggering $290 trillion bottleneck that is getting worse every single year. Think about how you send an email. You type it, you hit send, and it arrives on the other side of the world in an instant. Now think about how a bank sends money across an international border. It is essentially 1974 technology being used in 2026. Banks are required to keep trillions of dollars sitting in what are called nostro accounts. These are basically pre-funded buckets of cash sitting in vaults in foreign countries. just waiting there as reserves to make international payments possible. That capital is completely dead. It cannot be invested. It cannot grow. It cannot be put to work in any productive way. It just sits there as the slow and expensive lubricant for the outdated global payment system called SWIFT. This is not just a list of bank names, it is a graveyard of capital that could otherwise be working productively in the global economy. By replacing all of these pre-funded accounts with a bridge asset like XRP, Ripple turns that $10 trillion pile of completely stagnant cash into active and constantly flowing liquidity. It means the global economy stops paying what amounts to a waiting tax on its own money just to move it from one country to another. And this is not a luxury or a nice-to-have improvement. It is a mathematical requirement for the global economy to function properly over the next decade. Right now, a standard cross-border payment takes 3 to 5 full business days to settle. If it is Friday afternoon, you are waiting until Tuesday at the earliest. XRP settles the same transaction in 3 to 5 seconds. We are not talking about a modest incremental improvement here. We are talking about a system that is 100,000 times more efficient. It is the difference between riding a horse and buggy and flying in a jet engine. The XRP ledger does not care about national borders or political relationships. But the underlying mathematics strictly requires the price of the asset to be high enough to move the entire world's transaction volume without causing significant price swings or friction in the process. That insight from XRP co-creator David Schwartz cuts right to the core of the $290 trillion problem. By 2030, the sheer volume of value that needs to move across the planet every day will simply overwhelm the current payment infrastructure. If the bridge is too small, meaning if the price of XRP is too low relative to the volume needing to move through it, it simply cannot carry the weight of global commerce without breaking down. The math itself forces the valuation of XRP higher as the transaction volume scales up. As we approach 2030, the demand for instant settlement hits a tipping point where the old system literally cannot handle the projected volume. It is not really a choice between SWIFT or XRP anymore. It is a choice between making progress or facing complete gridlock in the global financial system. This is the kind of deep technology logic that we track every day in our community. If you want real-time alerts and technical breakdowns as they happen, there is a link to our Discord in the description below. Our paid Discord members get full technical analysis on these liquidity shifts, but the free side is where all the conversations get started. This is an open invitation, and you are more than welcome to join us. We are watching the plumbing of the world change in real time while the rest of the market is completely asleep. Now, with all of that said, it does raise an important question. If the entire financial world moves to instant settlement, what exactly happens to the banks that refuse to give up their 3-day float? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Ripple's quiet monopoly. While retail investors are busy arguing about price charts, Ripple is quietly collecting the keys to the global banking system one by one. They have stopped acting like a scrappy technology startup and started acting more like a central bank for the digital age. By securing vast financial licenses in Brazil and an Australian financial services license for the AUDD stablecoin, they are systematically surrounding the traditional financial system with fully regulated entry points on every side. It is a Trojan horse strategy that the broader market has not yet fully understood or priced in. This is not just a collection of company logos, it is a living and growing network. Every single time a transaction occurs anywhere within this 85-partner web, the XRP ledger wins. Ripple is not just collecting licenses either. They are getting seats at the most important decision-making tables in Washington, D.C. With Ripple's leadership now sitting on the CFTC's Innovation Advisory Committee, they are actively helping write the regulatory rules that will govern the next 50 years of global finance. This is not a company fighting for its survival anymore. It is a company designing the future of money itself from the inside out. We are no longer operating on the fringes of the financial world. We are building the actual infrastructure and the regulated bridges that will carry the entire global economy into a new digital era of instant value transfer. Managing this kind of wealth requires a high-level security strategy. You simply cannot rely on a single platform or exchange. I always talk about what I call the exchange redundancy strategy, which means keeping fully verified accounts across multiple different exchanges in different regions. Kraken is a key part of my personal setup because they are incredibly reliable. If you sign up through my link in the pinned comment below, they are offering 3% cash back on cash and crypto deposits for new users. In that comment, you will also find a complete list of the other exchanges I use as part of my personal redundancy strategy. Do not leave your exit strategy to chance. Check out the pinned comment for all the details. Spreading your liquidity across trusted and reliable platforms like Kraken is not just about security. It is about ensuring that you always have a door open and accessible when the rest of the market is locked out during a sudden liquidity event. Ripple recently closed a massive $500 million funding round, valuing the company at $40 billion. They now have more available cash than many regional banks across America. They are systematically building their way into every corner of the global financial market, ensuring that when the $290 trillion flood of institutional money finally arrives, they will own the only pipes large enough and reliable enough to handle that pressure. The reality check. If the utility case is so strong and clear, why is 60% of the entire XRP supply currently held by people who are underwater on their investment while the price rejects every piece of good news as it arrives? This is the part of the story where the hype fades away and the cold, hard numbers take over. But before we go any further, you need the mandatory disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. This is simply an investigation into Ripple and XRP. It is not a buy signal or investment advice. Crypto is volatile and you can lose everything you put in. Right now, despite being legally and officially named a digital commodity by both the SEC and the CFTC just weeks ago, XRP is stuck in a brutal 60% decline from its 2025 price highs. This creates a massive psychological wall in the market. Because 60% of all XRP is held by people who are currently at a loss, every time the price jumps upward, it is immediately met by a wave of frustrated and relieved sellers who are simply trying to break even on their original investment. This creates a retail ceiling that kills upward momentum before it can develop into a real sustainable trend. The technical chart signals are screaming for caution right now. We just saw what is called a death cross form on the daily chart, a pattern that historically tends to precede a deeper price decline before any recovery. Even Ripple's own RLUSD stablecoin, which was supposed to serve as the fuel for the XRP ledger ecosystem, saw its market cap drop by $300 million this month. It looks like big institutional money is currently pulling back rather than leaning in aggressively. We have not yet found the true bottom of this correction cycle, and the current technical setup suggests the real floor is likely somewhere in the range of 90 cents before we see any meaningful and sustained institutional buying recovery. That warning from the analyst Wedson is a significant bucket of cold water for anyone hoping for a moonshot tomorrow. With the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates high and inflation proving stubbornly persistent, the utility narrative for XRP is fighting an uphill battle against a very difficult global economic backdrop. Institutional interest has not disappeared entirely, but it has gone noticeably quiet in recent weeks. The drop in on-chain RLUSD liquidity is a warning light on the dashboard. When the RLUSD supply contracts by 20%, it signals that on-chain transaction volume is slowing down. You simply cannot have a major price breakout when the very engine powering the liquidity is running low on fuel. The road to becoming the Google of global finance is not a smooth, straight line up. It is a series of brutal and deliberate shakeouts designed to take the asset away from impatient and fearful holders and move it into the hands of patient, long-term investors. Most people will sell their positions right here at exactly the moment when the infrastructure is finally finished and ready to be used at scale. That is the real and painful risk of the reality check phase we are currently in. The smart money signal. The smartest money in the room right now is not watching the price ticker every hour. It is watching the vault and the adoption metrics. Commentators like Zach Crypto and Troy Black have spent months making the case that we have finally moved past the era of pure hype and speculation. They see a fundamental and permanent shift from retail-driven dreams to institutional transaction volume. We have entered what they call the utility era, a period where the daily price movement is essentially just background noise compared to the massive and real growth happening in the network's transaction throughput. This shows that we have finally crossed the chasm between speculation and genuine real-world utility. The adoption S-curve indicates that the foundation is no longer just being built, it is now being occupied and put to work. As the first wave of banks and payment providers begins climbing the adoption curve, the network reaches a point of no return where adoption becomes permanent and self-reinforcing. Troy Black frequently points out that being early in a major technology shift feels exactly like being wrong until the precise moment when you are proven right. He focuses on the sheer and growing volume of transactions hitting the XRP ledger every day as the only metric that truly matters in understanding where this is all heading. If you find these market signals difficult to read and interpret, check out cheekyschool.com, where we offer free courses to help you understand what the data is really telling you. We also have professional courses available with a 50% off code in the description below. The 8-year liquidity cycle. We are at a critical point in an 8-year liquidity cycle. We are looking at a $10 trillion global debt rollover where the world desperately needs a high-velocity bridge to move enormous amounts of value quickly and reliably. And XRP is currently the only asset sitting at that critical junction with all the right properties and regulatory approval to serve that role. While smaller retail investors are panicking about a temporary price dip, the largest wallets on the XRP ledger are behaving very differently. These whale accounts are quietly vacuuming up the available supply at a rate that has not been seen in years. They are actively preparing for a world where liquidity itself becomes the single most valuable commodity on the entire planet. The data reveals a massive transfer of power happening beneath the surface, from small holders to large institutional wallets. A 14% surge in wallets holding 1 million or more XRP suggests that institutional giants are systematically and deliberately positioning themselves for the long haul. They are not looking for a quick speculative trade. They are securing the inventory they will need to help run the global financial system. This is classic wealth redistribution in action. The crowd sells out of fear and emotion. The titans buy in because of the mathematics and the long-term logic. They understand that moving trillions of dollars globally every day requires a bridge asset with massive depth and liquidity behind it. If you wait for the price to fully reflect this reality before you act, you will have already missed the window of opportunity entirely. Now, this raises one final important question. If the institutions are filling their vaults while you are checking the daily price chart every few hours, who do you think will be in the better position when the liquidity floodgates finally open? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. The pre-IPO moment. We are standing right now in what amounts to the pre-IPO days of the Internet of Value, and the upcoming Clarity Act markup in Congress is the starting pistol for everything that follows. The regulatory fog did not just lift gradually. It evaporated completely on March 17, 2026, when the SEC and CFTC jointly and officially classified XRP as a digital commodity, placing it in the same protected category as Bitcoin. And while the price is currently lagging behind these enormous fundamental developments, the research clearly shows that the plumbing for an entirely new global financial system is effectively finished and ready to be used. Tokenized commodities on the XRP ledger have already surged past $1 billion in value, capturing 15% of the entire global tokenized asset market. The meaning of that is crystal clear. The ledger is capturing an enormous portion of the institutional market before the general public has even arrived. The real Google moment happens when the world's largest asset managers stop watching from the sidelines and start actively deploying capital. We have already seen nearly $1.5 billion flow into XRP ETFs since late 2025. But the real floodgates open when giants like BlackRock enter the arena to resolve the current global liquidity friction and bring the asset to the most conservative and largest wealth managers in the world. The current price suppression is simply a mechanical storm. The truly smart money is watching the ledger vault and adoption metrics rather than the daily price ticker. As we prepare for a massive and structural shift in how the world's most valuable assets are moved and settled, XRP has transformed from a speculative asset into a mandatory layer of global settlement infrastructure. It is becoming the natural and completely neutral bridge for over 100 nations that are currently developing their own central bank digital currencies. The efficiency of settling transactions in seconds rather than days makes this outcome feel less like speculation and more like an absolute inevitability. The infrastructure is now in place and fully functional. The question that remains is simple and personal. Will you be watching the system work from the outside, or will you own a piece of the rails it runs on? To see how this liquidity crisis actually plays out for the rest of the broader market, make sure to click on the video that is currently on your screen right now. I will catch you all over there. Sonnet 4.6 Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double